Okay, so I heard this wild claim the other day, and it was this that you were probably happier at ages 4, 5, or 6 than you are right now. So I thought we could maybe talk about this today. By the way, everyone, this is the No Excuses podcast with Ryan Montes and Alana Banks. And Ryan, what do you think of this wild claim? Why is this important?
Yeah. So I've heard this before, or there's different variations. You were happier when you were a kid, or than you are right now, blah blah blah. And I saw it there. I only noticed it today in our kind of podcast topic roster here. And immediately I just felt like there actually is a lot to unpack and a lot to say about this statement. And I immediately jotted down these two notes about this statement. The statement that you were probably happier at ages 4, 5, 6 than you are right now. For a lot of people, by the way, probably that's true, right? And the jot notes that I wrote right away were like, why this statement is really important. And then on the other hand, why this statement is totally irrelevant and kind of ridiculous. And there's arguments for both, right? And we've talked about this kind of, Alana, in the past, where there's this simple statement that somebody makes. And really it depends on the mind of the listener, whether it's going to be an empowering thing or just a nightmare and an excuse to just be upset. Right?
Yeah, or totally ridiculous.
Like that whole kerfuffle with it's okay to not be okay, right? So I do want to talk about this. You were probably, and I don't mean you, I mean you, the world, right? The editorial you were probably happier at ages 4, 5, 6 than you are right now, listeners, everyone. Yeah. What do you think about this statement? You think it's real? You think it's true?
Yeah, when I think of kids, they're just living their life, right? They're totally taken care of if they have responsible parents. And they're just doing their thing. They're just enjoying their life. They're being creative. They're, not really worrying about anything. And when you kind of don't have any care in the world, you're just living your life and enjoying yourself, then I would say you're probably pretty happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. You're carefree. You don't need to, kids tend to not be worrying about a lot of stuff. I get that. But is there value in realizing that? For an adult that's sitting, listening to our podcast or sitting at the office, is it really empowering to be what would be really good if I had the exact mindset and mental state of a 5-year-old? That life would be so much better, right? When we think about it that way, is that really the case? Could I be in my adult body and have a 5-year-old mindset, and would we still describe that as a good thing?
I think you need to approach it from the angle of, and I think I've said this before, childlike wonder.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not obviously having the mind of a child, but it's having that childlike wonder, just looking at everything as though you're looking at it for the very first time, or experiencing something as though you're experiencing it for the first time. And I've really played around with this because I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
But just even going to a grocery store that you've never been to before, especially a nice one, I'm in Ontario, but Loblaws is the nicest grocery store, right? Yeah. And so sometimes I'll go into Loblaws and I'm just this is just such an amazing grocery store. Yeah. There's just so many cool things here. And, and so it's approaching life as though you've never experienced it before. That's what I think of when I see this statement.
Yeah.
And that does bring on joy.
Yeah.
Immediately. It feels silly. You feel a little bit silly doing it. But once you practice it enough, you can snap out of a negative state really quickly.
Yeah. I think that is a good argument for the merit of this statement. People, you were happier when you were a kid than maybe you are now. Because that's what, like, there's stuff that comes into the average person's mind as they grow that in many cases makes life worse, right? Like self-doubt,
Yeah.
self-consciousness, limiting beliefs, traumas, et cetera, which, children are free of a lot of that, right?
Yeah.
And it's not so much like I don't think it's fair to say that a person who's 4, 5, or 6 has a greater capacity for happiness than anybody else of any other age. I would say it's fair to say that um a person who's a kid still 4, 5, or 6 has not yet had the misfortune of accepting all these other barriers to happiness that people tend to accept as a matter of just normal living
Mm-hmm.
in becoming an adult. So I think, I mentioned there's value to this statement and there's value to ignoring this statement. I think part of the value to this statement is to realize if the kid can be that happy, I can too. It's not that I don't have the capacity, it's that I'm allowing something to interfere with my capacity to feel happiness and or joy and or whatever positive emotions that children have unlimited, unfettered access to seemingly. Right? Would you
Yeah.
agree, Alana
Yeah.
Banks?
Yeah. I mean, they're no happier necessarily than you can be. They just haven't, yeah, like you said, they just haven't had the programming that we've had. They haven't
Yeah.
had as many negative things potentially happen to them or enough experiences where they have that self-doubt or, they have that lower confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it also all depends on who the parents are and what kind of environment that they live in and that type of how safe they feel. So there are a lot of other kind of like factors at play, but generally I would say, when you're 4, 5, 6, you're like what in kindergarten, grade 1, they're
Mhm.
pretty open. They're open-minded until an adult or a teacher or, someone in their life squashes that open-mindedness. But generally, they're pretty open to exploring anything. You ask a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they'll be like, an astronaut, a pilot.
Mm.
They don't even second guess, oh, well, I can't become that because blah, blah, blah. Right. Like they are just like, I want to be a fireman. I want to be, or sometimes they're like, I want to be a singer and I want to be a fireman. Right.
Yeah.
Because they're just open. They don't know, there is no filter
Yeah.
a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And even when it comes down to kind of like speaking their mind about certain things too, like they'll tell it like it is. And it's refreshing sometimes because, I think a lot of adults censor themselves or filter what they're saying. They don't actually share how they're feeling. They're not communicating their needs or their desires.
Yeah.
And that's because we've got these filters in place.
Yeah.
But really, when you think about it, like a child that with no filter, they are fully expressed. And that comes up a lot in the coaching world. You want to step into your power and be fully expressed and, be your authentic self. Well, that's exactly what kids are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and part of it is that their mind is working differently, right? Like we know somebody who's under 7 years old, they don't yet fully have the critical faculty, coming in, which is the sort of perimeter between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then on the flip side, I mean, I think those are all valid arguments that we've gone through here
Totally.
about why this statement could be empowering. On the flip side, like, this idea, you were probably happier at ages 4, 5, 6 than you are right now. I mean, on the flip side, somebody might say, so what? right? Why is that a
Mhm.
problem? And is that a problem? Why does this necessitate action, or even why does it necessitate the sharing of
Yeah.
this statement? I think, like, to play the devil's advocate for a little bit, like, and what's the definition of happiness, right? I remember being a kid, and I remember one of the big themes of being a kid. I don't know what age this was attached to specifically, but I remember being a kid and constantly being disappointed that I couldn't do stuff that I wanted to do because I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like, I remember being a kid and being like, I want to go places. I couldn't because I was a child. I want to drive a car. No. I want to have money. Like, there's all these things that I wanted when I was a kid that were just like not possible, not even remotely possible. Now I'm an adult and I have all of them. And I must say, I'm happy about that. I'm happy that I can get in my car and drive to the gym and pump iron.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that when I was 5 years old. But I mean, and I think maybe the better response, rather than so what, to this, to, the statement, you were probably happier at ages 4, 5, 6 than you are right now, is that if that is the case for you, what are you doing about it? Right?
Mhm.
Listeners, if you hear that and that stings and you're like, yeah, the world is grinding everyone down and, adults are sad, right? And that's a problem. What are you doing about it? Right? Like, there's a big movement of people, and you touched on it earlier, Alana, who are committed to like living in joy and happiness and expression and the full expression of themselves, right? And so why not all of us? Why don't we do it? Right?
Mhm.
Why do people go on living in a state that is not the state that they want to be in? Right?
Well,
That's what comes to mind for me, right?
yeah. Well, and I think too, it all comes down to a limiting belief, right? Because a lot of, you might hear many adults say, oh, well, that was the back in the good old days, and they've been installed with this belief that being an adult equals, being unhappy, having all this responsibility, the burdens of, life and everything. But that's not true. There are adults out there who are living like children, but responsible children, obviously, but they're living with that childlike wonder. They are fully expressed. They are, being their authentic self. They're going back to activities that brought them joy when they were kids,
Yeah.
right? Because there is this kind of tendency as we get older, we stop doing those things that brought us joy. Like we stop coloring or maybe doing art or dancing or singing or whatever. And those are things that make your soul happy, right? Like those are things that bring you joy. And you don't have to stop doing those things as an adult.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay. So what do we do? What do we do? What do the listeners do? And I think here's the big question. If you're hearing this and you hear this statement, I think that's the power of the statement. You were much happier when you were 4, 5, 6 than you are now. If you hear that and it's not true, good. Right? If you hear that and you're like, oh, nonsense. I'm so happy right now. Great. Keep
yeah.
doing what you're doing. Or, if you hear that and you're like, well, actually, I had kind of a not great time when I was about that age and I've healed from that and things are much better now and that's fine. That's great too, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody hears this and is like, yeah, that's true. I remember being a kid and not having to pay a mortgage and not have this or whatever it is, that's causing you to feel triggered. I hate that word, triggered, but it is, it does make sense. I think that's really good evidence because anything that you've experienced in the past, you can experience again. This is an important realization for people. If you had joy previously in your life and you have less of it now, just know that you can experience that again and just take action to do it.
Yeah,
right?
You're allowed to have fun as an adult. You're allowed to have that joy. And one of the things I actually do with my clients when we're covering like a topic like this is I'll ask them, like, what did you love to do when you were a kid? If they're feeling a bit down in the dumps or they're feeling like there isn't a lot of joy in their lives, that's always a question that I ask. And it's something that sparks this like joy inside of them because they're like, oh, you know, I used to love to dance and I don't know, I gave that up and I don't do that anymore. But just like give yourself permission to dance. You don't have to do a dance class, just dance in your house, put on some music and dance if that brings you joy, or coloring or drawing or painting. You don't have to be perfect at it.
Yeah.
That we love to create too. That's the other thing. And kids tend to be more creative than adults.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
so,
tap into that creativity that you used to have.
yeah, I got a question people can ask themselves to perhaps help with this process of returning to the joy that they once had. You could ask yourself, when did I decide to stop being happy or being my happiest?
Mm.
Right? Now, this question necessitates that you're a person who takes responsibility for your own life, right? The question implies that. I don't know. Most of our listeners hopefully are. If you're listening to
Yeah.
a self-development and coaching podcast, probably you are. But if that question stings, right? Or if that question doesn't make sense to you, when did I decide to stop living in a way that makes me happiest? If that question doesn't make sense to you, you might be in putting yourself in a position where you're not taking responsibility for the decisions and the circumstances in your life, which I recommend you do, right? But it's a good question. What happened? What limiting belief did somebody or even myself put on me that caused me to stop accessing the happiest behaviors and the happiest emotions in my life, right?
Yeah.
And meditate on it and see what comes when you ask yourself this question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one for sure.
Yeah.
Like I was literally just at the beach before we got onto this podcast building a sandcastle with my son.
Yeah.
Doing some digging in the sand and it was fun.
Yeah.
So it's just, finding those little pockets that bring you joy. I remember even during the lockdown, I started coloring. I literally bought a huge box of Sharpies. It was like the 320 pack or something like that. Like I splurged. It was amazing. Okay. Because I used to love drawing and art and all this stuff. And I don't really do it as much anymore. I just don't make time for it, to be honest. But during the pandemic, I had a lot of extra time. And so I bought this massive box of Sharpies and it was just amazing. And I'd been given a couple coloring books for Christmas a few years earlier. Like, do you remember when like coloring books were all the rage? Like everyone was giving coloring books as gifts.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had a whole bunch that I just kind of had lying around. And I went to town coloring during the lockdown. And it brought me so much joy. It was so much fun. And, rather than like watching Netflix after dinner, like I would just pull out my coloring books and that big box of Sharpies.
Yeah. Right. And here's the question. Could 4-year-old Alana afford the 320 pack of all different color Sharpies? Did that product even exist when you were 8? The answer clearly is no. Right. So take that, internet. Right. But good point. Right. Good point. Yeah. Is there anything else to say about this thing?
No, I think, for the listeners, just think of something you love to do when you're a kid and go do that right now.
Yeah.
And report back.
Yeah. And I think if you want to temporarily feel sad for long-term happiness, ask yourself the question, what events occurred in my life that I chose to attach the meaning that I have to be less happy as an adult than I was as a child? Mm-hmm. Right. And how can I make a different choice now?
Yeah.
Right. There's a good question for everybody to ask themselves. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Because it wasn't the event, it was the meaning you attached to it.
Yeah.
Right. And there was stuff. There was stuff. We all had stuff. And we attached the meaning that, okay, this means now I'm a grown-up. Now I do grown-up things and feel grown-up ways. Right.
Yeah. But you don't have to. Right.
No. And well, you can redefine what grown-up things and grown-up ways are.
Hmm.
Grown-ups can be happy and full of joy and freedom and buying
Doing whatever you
320
want.
packs of Sharpie colorful pens or whatever.
Yeah, like this even just makes me think now I feel like this has just like opened up a whole other tunnel
Yeah.
and maybe we can revisit this, but it also makes me think of like, how are you dressing? Are you dressing the way you want to be dressing, or are you dressing the way you think an adult dresses? Um, your home, do you have your home set up in a way that is like exactly the way your parents' home was set up?
Yeah.
You know, um, those are two specific things that have come to mind and it's very subconscious, right?
Yeah.
It's that all is really subconscious, and it might not be bringing you joy because you're like, I don't actually like wearing these clothes. Why am I wearing these kinds of clothes?
Yeah.
You know,
Why am I wearing clothes at all? Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Another
or
question.
like, but it's just like because I see this around, I'm like, or going to like different people's homes too. I'm just like, is this your style, or is this like because you think you're an adult and this is the way you think your home needs to be set up,
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, that's a good point, right? Like the clothes, the home, but not even just that. What about the way you spend your time? Like,
totally.
are you working a job because you have a belief that that's what grown-ups do? I need to have a 9 to 5, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, or are you working a job because that's what you genuinely want to be doing, right?
Yeah.
Are you with a partner because, well, when you reach a certain age, just settle down and blah, 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 right? Or is that what you actually want? And, in a lot of cases, probably that is what people want. But in a lot of cases, like Alana, like you're saying, people are doing stuff because it's just the way it goes.
The way you're supposed to. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the way, you do adulthood.
Yeah. And maybe that's one of the reasons that kids have in some cases, have easier access to joy and happiness because they don't follow any of those rules. They just, they haven't learned them yet. And adults are pretty good about, letting kids be expressive and kind of figure things out on their own and not forcing too many societal roles and labels. Still lots.
Yeah.
But, if a kid wants to play dress up and imagine they're an astronaut and all this stuff, who's going to say no, right? But if an adult says, well, I'm going to go to space camp and take 6 months off of work, they will get pushback.
Yeah.
They will, right?
Yeah. And I think everyone can think of a friend. We all have that one friend, I find, that went the untraditional route.
Yeah.
Right. And everyone has so much to say about that one friend, but that one friend is actually the truest to themselves because they're like, you know what? I just wanted to go do my own thing. I didn't want to follow the pack and do life. Right.
Yeah.
I'm doing air quotes around life,
Yeah.
but, before I got into all of this work, I was on that trajectory, like, of like, well, this is what I do now, and this is what I do, and this is what I do. And, I had one friend who went the opposite direction of everyone else. And I never understood. It took me a really long time to understand like what was going on with him until I like got into this work. And now I'm like, oh man, you were smart. Like when we were a lot younger.
Yeah.
But none of us could understand what was going on there.
Maybe that person was smart and probably they were smart, but it's not always smart that causes people to go after their dreams. Sometimes it's just not realizing that they can't.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that in kind of, a tongue-in-cheek way, because of course anybody can do anything that they want, but we're kind of taught directly and indirectly that we can't, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of taught that it's too hard or impossible to just do whatever you want, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's an age where the world stops telling you that you can be a cowboy or an astronaut.
Yeah. Right? What is that age? That's what I want to know.
Yeah. What is that age? What is that moment where adults like flip the switch and it's like, okay, we're going to stop nurturing your radical dreams. And now it's like,
You got to
Replace
buckle down. It's really
astronaut.
time to settle down.
You
Yeah.
can be maybe an accountant that starts with A. It's similar number of letters, right? You got to go to university, 4-year degree, and then apply to 1 million jobs, and then do 1,000 interviews and maybe get one job, right?
Yeah.
Like there's the script, Johnny. Forget that astronaut stuff.
Yeah.
But then what about those people that actually became astronauts, right? Like I was at a first aid course a few years ago, or was it no, it was a fire safety course a few years ago, and there was an F-18 pilot sitting right next to me, right? He was like the same age as me, and like anyways, we had a lot of things in common. He was an F-18 pilot,
That's cool.
which is like a fighter jet
Yeah.
pilot, right? Like this was a real dude. Like I didn't, but if I wanted to, I could have touched his shoulder, right? Like people are out there doing this stuff that other people consider to be a dream or unrealistic, but somebody's got to do those jobs. Someone's
got to be an astronaut. Someone's got to be
an astronaut.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be like, what's another cool, weird thing? Somebody's got to be the captain of an oil rig or whatever. I don't know. I don't want to do that, but
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just follow your dreams, everyone.
Follow your dreams. This was a really like philosophical conversation this turned into, I think. Well, maybe not real.
No, I don't think so. Like this is a lot about like inner child healing, really. A little bit.
Yeah.
Like going back to that inner child, listening to what that inner child inside of you needs in this moment. What did it want to hear that it didn't?
Yeah. That's another question, by the way, we touched on a minute ago. What was that age where, your attainable dream became your nonsense dream that was never going to happen?
Yeah.
Right. What was that age when the people around you stopped humoring you and started telling you to be serious? Right.
Yeah.
And what meaning did we attach to that when it happened?
I think it's very gradual. I don't even know if it's like a switch that goes off. I feel like it's sort of this gradual thing. Because I even find myself being like that with my kids, and I catch myself when I go down that path because I'm like, no, Alana, don't. What are you doing? But like I have an 11-year-old, and so sometimes when I'm angry or like I'm in that mode where I'm just like, frustrated, I'm like, you're 11. Like 11-year-olds should be doing blah blah blah, and then I'm like, oh, why did I say that? I didn't mean to say that because. He's 11. He can do whatever he wants. Just because he's 11 doesn't mean he should be doing X, Y, Z. So instead, I rephrase it, and I'm like, you need to start taking more responsibility. Now that you're older and you have the independence to do these things, take responsibility for your life.
Yeah.
Make an egg sandwich. You know how to do that. I don't have to do that for you anymore.
Yeah. Make an egg sandwich. Exactly. If you make an egg sandwich today, you might be an astronaut tomorrow, right?
Yeah. Well, I just like to empower them with like, if you take more control of the things in your life, then you'll have more control over your life. You're not going to be waiting for me to make you an egg sandwich. You can do it.
Yeah. Right? That's a good point. That's a good lesson.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. All right. Let's read this statement one more time. See if there's anything else that comes to mind. I think we extracted a lot of value from this one sentence.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and it all started with the wild claim that you were probably happier at ages 4, 5, or 6 than you are right now. Yeah, and if that's the case, that's good data. That's good data to start doing something different or to analyze or to heal something and be as happy as you've ever been. Why not?
Yeah. And I think, it's like one of those statements. I think we talked about that last time, that it's like one of those statements that you can just like fluff off.
Yeah.
Right. Where someone will be, you say that and you're like, oh yeah, whatever, and you just keep going. But like, we just talked about this for like, 25 minutes. And there's a lot of value.
My life is different. That's it. No, I was already kind of a happy person. So, I mean, but no, I mean, we really did kind of unpack that.
We did.
A really nice way that I think will be helpful.
Proud of us.
I'm proud of us too. Especially you showing up injured to the podcast recording. Okay.
Good thing this is
So,
audio only.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now we've opened a massive mysterious loop for the listeners. What's wrong with Alana? She's fine. She'll be okay.
I'll be
Okay. Um, tune in next week to find out what's wrong with Alana. Anyway, no, she's fine. I think we got it. Anything else to add?
No, I think really the homework from this episode is, you know, approach life with some childlike wonder today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And report back.
And report back.
Yeah, on our Instagram. It's the No Excuses podcast. Drop a comment or send a DM and let us know.
Yeah. Do it.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that'll be it
That's
for this
it.
one then. Thanks,
All right.
Lana.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.